Hey everyone, Keith McGinnis here with KCDC Designs. So this is how I apply Bondo to a smooth edge. This is just my way of doing it, and I know many of you have your own way of doing it. I've gotten calls from people who that seam always seems to ghost through. So this is my process, and I never have seams goes through. I hate them, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen. So what I'm doing here is, after I've seamed the two pieces together and the glue has dried, I'm taking 80 grit and I'm going to roughen up that smooth edge so the Bondo has something to bond to. So that's what I'm doing right here is I'm taking my 80 grit, I'm going along the smooth edge, getting everything prepped, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is Bondo. Hey everybody, so just to throw in a little bit of a pro tip here, whenever you get a brand new can of Bondo, scrape the Bondo off the lid and then scrape the sides down in your can. Bondo's getting very expensive, and this prevents any of that from drying out, so I can get full use of everything that I've got in the can. I'm going to put my Bondo down on my surface, and I'm going to kind of put that into a circle, or kind of a puddle, if you will. So it'll help me judge how much cream hardener I want to put in there. And it'll also depend on the temperature. It's about 100 degrees the day I'm doing this, so I don't want to add too much. I need to make it be able to last. So, I know y'all might do it differently, but this is how I do it. One thing I know and remember from my auto body days is you want to get that first layer pressed in to the pores really hard. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to put this first layer in, pressing it down into the pores, get those oils in the pores, because I know the next layer I put on there is then going to adhere. Right now, I'm pressing that in there because I need it to adhere to the wood. So I'm going to go all the way around. Get that pressed in, and then I can go in and add a heavier layer. Okay, a little off camera, but I got to get this other edge over here. If you don't get it pressed in there, it's not going to adhere to the wood, and you got a chance of it coming off. All right. Now, I know y'all do this differently. I put Bondo on fairly heavy. Why? Because I'm going to go over it with 80 grit to knock down any highs and lows. Then I'm going to go over it with 150 grit and get it smooth. Normally on my edges, I have no wood showing whatsoever, but I also know that I don't have it on there really thick. I'm just giving myself the best opportunity to not allow that seam to go through after I've poured my epoxy. Once again, I've said it before, and I'll probably say it a million times. If you can see it or feel it before epoxy, you're going to see it or feel it after. I need to get this other edge down here, so I've got to pull my countertop a little bit over this edge. Sorry, I'm off camera. So after I get my Bondo spread on there, I'm going to look it over really closely to see if I see any pinholes, see if I see any low areas, and get those cleaned up and get that as smooth as I can, ready for sanding. Remember what seemed like just a little bit of hardener that I added into that Bondo? Actually worked out pretty good. For one, that's all I had left, so not a whole lot left over, and it's already starting to set up. So I was able to get all the way around, and yeah, you can even see that right there, starting to set up already. So after I get that done, I'm just going to take some acetone. This is just a flexible cutting board. It came from Walmart. You get a package of, I don't know, 3 or 4 for $5. For me, works fantastic. Okay, again, remember, it's 100 degrees outside today, so my Bondo, it hasn't even been an hour. I'd probably been more like a half hour, but my Bondo has set up, and so I've put 80 grit on my orbital sander. And again, what I'm doing is I'm taking off some material, and I'm also smoothing that over. I'm taking off all of the highs and the low areas, getting a nice smooth surface. And then once I get that sanded down with 80, then I'm going to turn around and I'll put some 220 on there, go around my edge, and give myself a nice smooth surface. And as you can see, I don't add a lot of Bondo, but I add enough Bondo to where my edge is covered and there is no bare wood. Okay, now I'm going to go over it one last time with 220. I want to look it over. And what I'm checking for is pinholes and any deep areas. Here's one right here, so I'll pay a little attention to that. Run that corner off a little better and we'll be good to go. Again, this is what works good for me, but for me it's a two-step process. Cut it down with 80, go over with 220, sometimes 150, and I'm good to go. Okay, now, as you run your hand across there, if you feel like it's wavy, I used to be concerned with that, but it never shows up in the finished product. But if you're concerned about it, and it does feel like it's too wavy, too many highs and lows, I have a sanding block. This, I believe, is a 9-inch, maybe, sanding block. And I've got some 220 on here. You can take that. And give you a very smooth finish. I rarely do that with my smooth edges, but I wanted to show you, if you do have some high areas, you can put 120 on there, 150, 80 grit. You can use that sanding block to knock it down. And I will always use a sanding block on my seams that I do on top. It does a really good job of knocking down those highs and giving me a nice smooth finish. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the same 220 grit that I've got up here, and I'm going to clean off this top edge. That way when I run my router across there, my router is going to run nice and smooth. Personally, I always router after I've applied the Bondo. And the reason why is if I router it before the Bondo, by the time I sand it down, I no longer have that nice quarter rounded edge. So I'm going to get the top of this sanded down. Okay. Now the top edge is ready to be routered. As far as the bottom edge goes, I'm going to be flipping this upside down because I'm going to do a 1/4 inch on top. I'm going to do an 1/8 inch round over on the bottom. And once I turn this upside down, then I'll be able to sand off any Bondo that's on the edges. Then I'll be able to router that and get a nice, smooth, rounded edge. So let's get to that. Prior to turning this over, since I've got my 220 grit on there, I am going to also sand the surface and get it prepped. All right, once I get that top sanded down, we'll be ready to router the edges and get it ready to go into the studio and prep it for epoxy. Okay, this is a Bosch 1.25 horsepower palm router. I've used this for more than 2 years and it's been a great tool. So I'm going to change the adjustment. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to eye this to get it as close as I can. And then with a scrap piece of MDF, here's where I want to make sure I have the depth correct on my router. So I'm just going to run a short, small 1/4 inch round over, and we'll see if we're close. Okay, that doesn't happen very often, but that's exactly where I want it. If I had the bit up too high, it's going to leave a ridge right along this area. Now, most of your routers are going to have a micro adjustment, and that's what this is here. So I'll loosen this up, I'll adjust it just a little bit, I'll run another quarter round just until I have removed that little ridge. Then I know I've got a really nice 1/4 inch round over. So I now have a 1/4 inch round over. I've got my router set. I've got an exhaust fan on that I'm going to turn on, and then I always use a respirator. Obviously I wasn't when I was sanding my Bondo, and I should have been, but I wear a respirator, especially when I'm doing a 1/4 inch round over. It does put off a lot of dust, and this MDF is bad for you to breathe in, so always make sure you're wearing a respirator. All right, so it's going to get noisy here, and I'll mute this part. So there's another point that I want to make, and it's really loud in here. When you're routering, if you press against the surface, especially on a Bondo edge, your bearing is going to leave a mark in that Bondo. And so these 2 finger depressions right here is what I will use. So as I'm routering, I put my fingers here. I want to press down, but I don't want to press in. I don't want to put an indentation in. I don't care about the back side here, but the front side where I have the Bondo, I don't want to leave an impression there. And that used to happen all the time, and it's because I would push down and I would pull in. So now what I do is just use my fingers, and very lightly, I'm just using this other hand to guide. I just go along here to create that edge. Is that a pro tip? Fun fact? As always, everyone, please wear eye protection, and please wear a dust mask, and please be comfortable with the tool that you're using. After I've routed my edges, to me, the router leaves somewhat of a rough surface. Maybe it's the blade, a bit, hard telling. So I just like to go over that with a little bit of 220, and all I'm doing is just smoothing over that edge. I actually have nothing to say here, but the silence drives me crazy. So I got to fill in the dead spot. All right, that's it. This side is ready for bead primer. I'm going to flip this up over on the other side, sound down that top edge so my router will go around it smoothly, and then I'm going to put a 1/8 inch round over on that underside edge. Before I flip this over, you know how I was saying that if you press your router in there, it's going to leave an indentation in your Bondo? That did not. So my bondoed edge still looks fantastic, and as you can see, there really is no way for that seam line to go through. Okay? Alright, let's get this turned over, get it flipped to the other side, get this into the studio, and get the rest of the bump pieces made.